Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, your weekly host for the 1 hour show. And we speak with business, professional, nonprofit, and political leaders each and every week. The goal of the program to inform and make our listeners aware of things that are going on, not just in Rutland County, but throughout the state. Things that in some cases will affect everybody listening, like a new law or regulation that might go into effect. Today, I should mention also, our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward to the 179th fair coming up August 12th through the 16th, 2025. That may sound like a long time away, but it's closer than you might think. So our thanks again to the Vermont State Fair and the Rutland County Agricultural Society for sponsoring the show each and every week. It's been a while since we've had our guest on who we have today, Rutland Police Chief Brian Kilcullen. And it's always good to see him and get caught up on things that are happening at the local PD and ways in which the Vermont legislature might be able to help out. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about that as we move along. But welcome back, Chief. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to be back. It's been a few months. Whenever you've had an opening for someone, I've been unavailable. So it's nice to actually be available at this point.
Yeah.
So it's good to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about Rutland Stats, or Rut Stats as we call it. This is, I think, a pretty good indication of where the community is in terms of, having things more and more under control, little less chaotic, that kind of thing. Are we still in a good place?
Yeah, we are. With Rutstat, we do meet every 2 weeks, and we've been doing this for roughly 12 years now. And again, we go through our crime trends. We highlight addresses we've been to at least 3 times in a 2-week period. We've got a lot of our partners in the room. The idea is to highlight these locations and then leverage resources from others in the room to sort of direct those resources to those addresses to bring some stability to those households and thereby to the neighborhood. So again, we've been doing it for about 12 years now. Over the last 5 months or so, our analysts had been deployed with the Guard out of the country, and so our ability to do some of this analysis was somewhat limited. But again, we haven't missed a beat. Sergeant Jason Williams stepped up and has been doing the presentations. Our call volume is down somewhat, which is good. It allows us to do some proactive things. And that sort of really ties in with some of the recruitment and retention contracts and a lot of other things. Having the additional personnel allows us to be a little more proactive and do things that the community has asked for. We regularly get complaints of traffic-related type issues, and having additional personnel allows us to do those sorts of things. And so those numbers are way up. It's sort of a double-edged sword. We get asked for the increased enforcement, but then when we see a lot of police officers out there doing traffic stops. Hey, what's going on? I got stopped today. But again, we're able to do a lot of the things that that our community expects and deserves.
I have to imagine that there's a real strong connection between the hotel-motel program, which is eventually coming to an end. We had a movement earlier this year in the so-called Budget Adjustment Act, or the BAA, to keep funding that and extend the date by which people had to leave facilities. The governor was not in favor of it. He's been pretty clear about his dislike for the program, the fact that he feels it just isn't working. It isn't getting the desired result. So he vetoed the Budget Adjustment Act, which meant that, again, people have 80 days. Once those 80 days are up, they have to exit unless they are in a situation with, a mom with kids, disabled, veterans, that kind of thing, sort of the most vulnerable segments of the population. But I have to think that as people exit the motels in our area that house people that are homeless, you'll see more of that on the street kind of thing. I also think probably Rutstat is a little bit different in the warmer months than it is in the winters, but I could be off on both counts.
No, it is. You're right on both counts. But I must say with the the current state of the program at the hotels, with fewer people in the hotels, the hotels have really not been on our three-peat location list. So we haven't had the calls to the hotels since a good number of participants in the housing program had been sort of vacated from the hotels. But it does, sort of put them elsewhere in the city. And so we do respond fairly regularly and identify fairly regularly some encampments in certain areas that we get concerns about. To your other point, the
seasonal difference.
It does tend to get a little bit busier as it gets warmer. But as I said earlier, our call volume has been down, so our calls for service have been down. And again, the more active and proactive we can be out in the community, I think it does positively impact the calls for service. So we bring some stability before getting called to do so. And so, again, having additional positions, we hope that will continue to provide a more sense of stability in the community going forward.
We're talking with Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen. I was surprised the other day. I saw it on television. I wasn't even aware of it. There are literally people camping out within 30 yards of the State House. So you have the Golden Dome, and then you have a rather steep hill kind of behind it, and there are tents set up. Unfortunately, there's a lot of trash and that kind of thing as well. But you don't see it inside the building. It's sort of literally two sides of living with people that, for one reason or another are forced to make that choice to live outside in a tent versus those inside who have a little bit better situation, I would assume, in most cases. So I was really surprised that they were that close. As far as I know, haven't caused any problems. So that's one thing. But, that population is very transient, as you probably are well aware of, Chief. So I don't want to liken it to, there used to be a game called Whack-A-Mole, but it's sort of, they pop up and then you respond. And then for one reason or another, they leave that particular location, but find one not that far away and have a tendency to sort of pop up again. And that must be challenging.
Yeah, you're right. It is. We'll get calls for concerns on some encampments, and we'll respond. And we may have to move people along. Again, if it's on private property, we're somewhat limited as to what our authority is in situations like that, unless there's a real health concern. But when on public property, we can move them along. And you're right; they will move on to other locations in the city that we may get calls on later. And for the most part, I think those who are living in tents prefer to sort of live peacefully, and they're not looking to cause issues. But we do respond when we get calls raising any sorts of concerns sort of surrounding, those who are living on either public property or sometimes on private property.
One of the more negative aspects of that, and I think you and I have talked about this before, if the motel-hotel program was to work, there needed to be a requirement that people got services for whatever it was that was troubling them, whether it was substance abuse or mental health conditions, so that they could get out of that and become more stable and eventually become sort of contributing people to the community. And that was never put into place from the time it began, way back now, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Most of it was paid for by federal dollars when it began and during COVID. So the state wasn't really sort of worried about it that much. But then when all the federal money went away, the state was on the hook for it. And that's when it became really obvious that it was not a program that was working in most cases to get people, back on their feet. And I don't know who to blame on it. I guess the legislatures, for one thing. We could have passed a law that made it a requirement. But I also kind of faulted the hotel and the motel owners who didn't seem particularly interested in getting people back on their feet, because they were in a position where they were going to just keep getting paid over and over again. So it didn't make any difference to them.
No, you're absolutely right. I think had it not been for the COVID and the housing program, again, I'm not in the tourism industry, but I would expect the occupancy was probably 40 to 60% at market rate. And then during COVID, I suspect the occupancy went up to near 100%. And the rate was, I believe, exceeded market rate. So you're right. It was certainly a cash cow, I think, that was somewhat the motivating factor to participate in housing individuals who were facing homelessness. But you're right. It was complicated, and as you pointed out, too, in terms of the requirement to participate in programs, it's something we had asked for early on. We had asked the state for the state to provide what we call the resource desk. But again, rather than just housing people, bringing people, especially from outside the area, they need to be connected to the appropriate services. Fast forward a few years, and those things started to happen. But you're right; it had been quite some time before those things happened, and at that point, it was difficult to manage.
We're talking to Brian Kilcullen, Rutland City Police Chief. The other group that I don't hear as much about as I did at one point is Project Vision. I know it's still active and people are still working, but it seemed like, and again, the whole COVID thing turned our world upside down, and we haven't gotten back to many of the sort of ways that we existed before that. But I don't seem to hear as much about Project Vision. It's still going on and everything, right? It
is, absolutely. Still meet the second Thursday of every month at noon. And still very active. As a matter of fact, Department of Public Safety within the past year started to roll out a program called the Situation Table. And what it does is it brings all, here locally anyway, and we were one of those sort of recipients of that training and instituted this particular program, but it brings a lot of our partners to the table on a weekly basis, and any partner can sort of raise an issue with an individual or family of concern, and then the partners in the room who have potentially the ability, the resources, the mandate sort of to address the underlying issues are then sort of convene and come up with a plan, a short-term plan and a long-term plan, but sort of an immediate plan to, again, address the underlying situation to, again, bring some stability to the household. And so we just started that 2 weeks. We've had 2 situation table meetings, identified roughly 4 situations. And so it is still very active.
And of course, the housing piece of this is also so important, so integral to figuring out a solution for some of the folks who are right now without homes. The legislative delegation was invited to go, I think it's the Methodist Church on Strongs Avenue. It used to be Mincer Brothers building. And I was very, very impressed with what's going on there. Ellie McGreary, I think her name is, if I'm remembering correctly, kind of like started volunteering, and then all of a sudden she's the boss. She's the kingpin on it, or queenpin, and is doing a fantastic job. I do want to tip my cap to her. We had the tour that day, and there were probably 50 or 60 people enjoying breakfast, relaxed kind of atmosphere. Nobody misbehaves. They do breakfast and lunch, I think it was 4 days a week. And they open around 6 in the morning and they close maybe in the middle of the afternoon. But it's a steady program that people can count on for food. And even if they just want to get in out of the elements, especially in the winter months, and have a place to be and connect with others, I was really impressed with that. And I'm hoping the word was they're going to move to, I think, the Immaculate Heart of Mary facility a little bit later. And I thought it was a great example of people, literally, these are all volunteers just stepping up and doing their best.
Yeah, they are certainly meeting a need at that location. They do serve quite a number of individuals who have, who are struggling. It's and as really there's quite a lot of activity at that location. They tend to keep us busy because of the activity that is there. There's a lot. They do serve a lot of individuals, and so we do stop by periodically and try to keep things in order, because it is quite a large crowd that actually has the need that's being met by the Methodist Church.
Well, I hope if they do move, and I think it's probably going to happen, that they get a little bit larger facility and can, begin to stabilize a bunch of people who otherwise don't have any place to go. And it was impressive. That's kind of my point of the whole thing. And the housing piece, Stephen Box came up to the legislative delegation meeting this past week, because by the time this airs, which is going to be on May 4th, he will already have made his appearance in the delegation. And so there's like so many little pieces of the housing puzzle to me. There's 6 or 7 different entities that all deal with it. He's one that's just sort of an independent guy off to the side who does his thing. He's got what used to be Mr. C's on High Street there, and houses a lot of veterans there, and is doing his part and is very successful at it. He can build something for a lot less than what the going rate is for other facilities. And then you've got the Housing Trust and everything else, Housing Authority. So I think it's too bad we can't just sort of get everybody on the same page and in the same entity to do that. But the housing has got to be the next piece that we deal with, really.
No, you're right. It is a complicated issue. And again, Mr. Box has seemed to have identified ways to overcome a lot of hurdles that others haven't. And so if we could replicate more of what he's doing, I think it would be a much better spot.
Yeah. People are going to need help. There's going to be a general assistance program in Vermont for this foreseeable future. Back before COVID, the stat I always got, Chris Loris is now working kind of with another person on that end of it. And I believe you were at the College of St. Well, it used to be the College of St. Joseph, Jim. And I heard the number 50, that we, for many years, we had about 50 individuals, maybe they were families, who needed assistance for one reason or another, lost their job temporarily, they were disabled, they were single moms with kids. And then during COVID, it shot way up into the hundreds and hundreds. And so the idea is to get it back down to levels that we can work with. You know, Rutland has been, in my view, overburdened with this segment of the population. I mean, we have, we've done our duty for sure. And in many cases, people from out of the area, and I don't mean necessarily out of state, although I think there's a certain piece of that population that do come from out of state, but just outside the area. So, for instance, up north, whether it's Chittenden County, Essex County, Orleans County, a lot of those people were brought down to Rutland. And as I say, I think we've done our part, but it'd be nice to think that with Chris's work and the work of everybody else, we can get this to a more stabilized situation.
No, you're right. It's got to be a manageable number. And I don't know what the current numbers are, but you're right. It had gone from roughly 50 to, I think, in the hundreds. And individuals did come, as you said, from outside of Rutland for a few reasons. One, there was some sort of availability here for a room. And the services are here. And so it's difficult, I think, to access services in some of the more rural areas, obviously, and so those who needed to avail themselves of the services that were here had to come here, and more often than not didn't return to some of the more rural areas.
Yeah. We're talking to Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen. I used to say monthly or every 6 weeks, but we haven't seen Brian for a little bit. He's been on planes going to and from certain places, and when we come back, we're going to take a break here. We'll talk with the chief about some of the events that might be coming up. Unfortunately, from my view, we won't be able to be talking to the Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen forever. There'll come a time when he is going to move along, as they say, and do some other things, and we'll maybe get a sense of what those might be. But right now, we'll take a break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we'll be right back with Chief Kilcullen. We're back on Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore. Each and every week, I try to find some leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, political arenas, and today, law enforcement. And we're talking with Chief Kilcullen from the Rutland City Police Department. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And believe it or not, in just a very few months, the 179th Vermont State Fair will be here at the fairgrounds in Rutland, August 12th through the 16th. And we're looking forward to that. So we talked a little bit about RUT Stats. That is the ability to have data which shows how often there's a needed response from law enforcement. And if a particular location gets called on 3 times in a 2-week period, they go into that sort of category. And then we talked a little bit about Project Vision. I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't still going on, or it just seemed like for a while it was like everybody was talking about it because it was so unique and different. And I think Rutland came up with the idea. I don't think anybody else in the state had it. I don't know whether anybody's copied it. They probably don't call it Project Vision, but there's some variant of that. And so now I want to talk about any events that are coming up. We've had occasion in the past to talk about down at Meadow Street Park about an event, but I know there are other things coming up. What do they call Whoopie Pie Festival in downtown Rutland later this summer. I'm sure I don't know if they're going to try to break their own record again or not, but that started off with you get a few thousand people and all of a sudden that's a big deal. Now they're really talking about big crowds there, which present challenges. Anytime you get a certain amount of people together, you have to sort of make sure that you've got things in place. So what sort of events are we looking at, Chief, in the next, let's say it's springtime now, we're in May. So May, June, July, August, September.
Well, so starting next Sunday, we'll have the Loyalty Day Parade. And so that's quite a tradition. And for those who can't make it in person, it will be aired, I believe, live on PEG TV. Yep. So that'll be on the 4th. I believe it kicks off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You mentioned Project Vision. We do have our weekly Project Vision meetings Thursdays, the second Thursday of every month at the Cavalry Bible Church on Meadow Lane. Our RUTSTAT every other Tuesday, not tomorrow, but next week, and every other Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning at the police station. Anyone's welcome to come down and sort of hear firsthand of what we've been responding to and some meet a number of our partners. Our police commission meeting is held the second Tuesday of every month at 6 o'clock at the police station, and that's where the command staff of the department does a presentation to the commission, sort of update them on what's been going on. One of the big things you mentioned was referring to the National Night Out. So that'll be coming up in August, and that's quite an event. You're right. That's the event I think you referred to on Meadow Street. Yep. Up until about 3 years ago or so, it was held at Georgetti Park, and once it moved to Meadow Street, I think it really took off. It's an incredible, perfect venue for it, and it's been really well attended. You get a lot, and again, between the police department, fire department, and the rec, they're the ones who are really organizing that. But with incredible participation from a lot of community partners who are there, sort of highlighting the services that they're providing, and with many things, you typically, if you provide food, people turn out, and they do. So you got a number of our elected officials on the grill and some other volunteers, and hot dogs, hamburgers. Stewart's is always there. We're scooping ice cream, so it's a great time. As I said, everyone comes. It's a huge turnout, and so we're looking forward to that in August. I believe it's usually the first Tuesday in August. I don't know the date offhand right now, but it's usually the first week in August. And
I know that was when I watched Emilio Rosario, Officer Rosario, interact with people, and he just has that knack. I don't know how else to explain it. And he said to me one time, he said, I interact with people who in the past were running away from me, and they now run toward me. And I think that says it all, where, there's good relationships being built with the law enforcement community and the community at large. And he's a pretty good example of that. We talked a little bit about, I called it drug court. I guess they call it treatment court now, too. And he was in there for the couple of times that I was there, and I know you've been there as well, Chief. So, yeah, and then I mentioned the Whoopie Pie Festival, which is put on by Cedar. I'm sure there are other events coming up. Used to be the fair, the agriculture, the Vermont State Fair, gave at least some of the officers a chance for some overtime, which is always a good thing. And luckily, I have not heard anything bad happening down there. I think we had a little bit of a bump, but I didn't think it was more than just a slight little bump in the road last year. But those are some of the things that people think about and talk about.
No, you're right. And over the last several years, I've been there at the fair, some years more than others. But over the last, really since COVID, the numbers, you really started to see the numbers come up in terms of attendance. But the problems haven't come up sort of proportionally. So it's really, for the most part, it's gone real well for, I think, the organizers and certainly for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Robert Congdon has done a super job getting the fair back on its feet financially. The trajectory is straight up. They're going to have some great musical acts, I'm sure. We're going to have him on this show in the next few weeks. I don't think they've signed any contracts yet with some of the, and it's traditionally country artists that come and perform. I did mention last week we had Alderman Dave Allaire on. The racing pigs are going to be back from what he told me, and that's like a big deal for a lot of people. There's nothing funnier than going down and watching the pigs run around the track there. It's really something. Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. Let's talk a little bit about the treatment court situation, because I think, again, that's a great example of some innovative thinking. Judge McCaffrey and I think former Senator Peg Flory were the ones that sort of initially came up with the idea, or at least had a notion of, instead of just putting people in jail all the time for treatment abuse or alcohol or drug abuse, they have this sort of other exit ramp that they can take. And it's pretty clear, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you will wind up behind the bars. But if you do, it gives you sort of that extra emphasis to get out of it, right? Absolutely, and it's not easy to get through. It's very structured. You're right. There are sanctions if participants sort of step out of line. But they've had some real success, and I've seen a lot of it. I do try to go as often as I can, and sort of see as individuals come into the program and then see them exit because they've graduated. And so it's incredible to really watch their journey. They've got so the court has a graduation actually tomorrow. So there's a participant who's been in it for some time, and he'll be graduating tomorrow. There was another one just a few weeks ago. So they had 2 graduations in a very short term. And again, seeing them as they enter, they're certainly in a much better place as they exit. Yeah. And the hope is that that sort of continues after graduation. But as the Judge Griffin always explains, hey, they're always welcome to come back and just to be there. And because they became such a big part of the program, they're always welcome to come back and watch and sort of interact with the team, because there is in addition to the judge, there's a whole team represented from the police department, from probation and parole. So there's a whole team that really supports the participants. So it's neat to see the success of the program. And I think it was at your suggestion, maybe more of a suggestion or more of an order than a suggestion, that a member of the city police department attend the court day and certainly the graduation. And I was there for one of the graduations, and it was really it was pretty moving to see people who at one time probably never thought they could beat the addiction, and then they did, and they got a job, and it's and their families there to support them. The judicial branch, as you mentioned, the court is very serious about this. It isn't just sort of a lark that, well, if you do this, and you gotta have to have a urine test every now and then, but it's a serious thing, and if you don't do it, you will face those sanctions. So I think it was at your suggestion anyway that we have law enforcement present. Yeah, it's been it certainly it predates me. There was a time where we didn't have the resources necessarily, but there came a time when we did again, and wanted to make sure that happened. And so again, it's
I don't know that it necessarily occurs throughout the state in the other treatment courts. I don't believe it does. And Judge Griffin points that out. And so I think since he's pointed that out, I think there's been more participation from law enforcement in the other treatment courts. But again, I think we've had some real success by having someone from the department on the team. So I think Rutland has sort of almost become the model of treatment courts in Vermont.
Yeah, so we got Project Vision that we started here, and also the treatment court. I had the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be on judicial retention, the committee that's a joint committee between senators and representatives. And Judge Griffin was up for retention this year. He was retained by unanimous vote. But most of the interview that we did with him focused on this. He was the one that brought it up. And again, there's 8 of us on the committee. So the other 7, I don't think were as necessarily aware as I was about the treatment court. And so he kind of gave them a quick lesson in it and was very passionate about it and very positive and said, this has made a difference. Even if you only reach 2% of the people that have issues, they wouldn't have been reached except for this. So it really, he did a great job, and I was glad that we voted to retain him for another 6 years. I think they're 6-year terms for judges, and I'm hoping that he continues to do that. Judge Valenti, of course, was the one that I was most familiar with. Again, I talk about Emilio's personality, and it does take a certain personality to be able to pull some of this off, and I think that was true with Judge Valenti for sure. John is just a wonderful, wonderful human being, and Judge Griffin is as well. So yeah, hopefully that will continue. It's funny too how word gets around. People talk about stuff. So if people are encountering challenges in their own lives with respect to substance abuse, a lot of times somebody that's already been through that treatment court process will say, you know what, you ought to do that. You could do it. And as you say, many of them turned back and showed up for the graduation and just watched. It was kind of neat.
Yeah. No, you get a real sense for sort of belonging, I think, for the participants in the program. And I must say, I think some of them anyway, almost it appears as though they look forward to coming every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, most people don't look forward to going to court to deal with
right.
these sorts of matters, but a lot of the participants, they honestly seem like they look forward to sort of the coming every 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. They're proud of what they've done in that interim. Many of them stand up and say, I got through my P test, no problem. I'm on the straight and narrow, Judge, and here's some examples. And yeah, they're proud. And that's what it takes a lot of times, is that sort of personal investment in themselves to get them to move along.
Yeah, and again, with funding with treatment courts, I'm not sure how it works at the state level, but they're certainly in need of additional funding, whatever's appropriated through the state. And so we try to support that. And so probably about 3 years ago, so the city joined in a class action lawsuit against some pharmaceutical companies and distributors of opioids. And so the money from that lawsuit started to come into the city a couple of years ago, and we're looking to sort of support, and we have supported treatment court using some funds, and we're looking to continue to do that using the opioid settlement money going forward, because it is an authorized use of these funds, and so we're looking to do that going forward.
We're talking to Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen, and I want to mention now that you will at some point not be here anymore. Well, you might still be here, but you won't be the police chief anymore. What are your, if you have any, maybe you don't yet, have any plans for the future? Are you going to stay in the area? Are you going back to New York? What are you going to do?
Well, so my hope is to stay here about another 2 years. There's still a few things that I'd like to accomplish, over the last 10 years or so. As you I'm sure know, the state tends to legislate various policies, and so we've kept up to date on our policies in terms of the ones that have legislated. But a lot of our other policies that aren't necessarily legislated need some updating, and so that's a fairly major undertaking that we want to get through over the next couple of years. Again, the situation table I mentioned is kind of just getting going. We want and we're just one part of that. But where we typically hold our RUTSTEP meetings is on the second floor in the Vision Center, and so we expanded that room. We're able to leverage DPW's resources before sort of the road construction and the outside DPW season began, and they did some work upstairs for us, and so we're going to continue working on that room to host these meetings and really have a very robust sort of program going forward. So there are a few things that still want to get done, and then after that 2-year period, no career plans, just sort of do things that I always wanted to do, travel. I like to ski and don't do that nearly enough anymore. I've sort of become a fair weather skier. There were days years ago that I remember skiing when it was 26 below, and now I get up a few days a week, and I the night before I go to bed, I say, maybe I'll go skiing a little bit in the morning, and I'll get up, look at the weather. Maybe it's 25 degrees. It's too cold. So I've become a real fair weather skier. So, being retired, you certainly have the luxury of doing things on your own schedule. So looking forward to that. In terms of where I'll be, living at that point, it's a good question. Been here for 10 years now, and it's really become home.
Well, good. And I think you've done a wonderful job, and we were very lucky to have you come into our city and lead the police force. When I ask some people, they say, "Yeah, I'm moving to Florida because I don't like the cold anymore," and I can understand that too. So it's nice to hear that you at least want to stay in the area for the most part, and maybe you'll volunteer and do some other things that you've always wanted to do.
That's
too.
Right. Yeah. There are certainly a lot of opportunities when you retire that you don't have when you're employed.
But it's 2 years away anyway,
yes,
so that's great. That's great. Mm-hmm. How about we talk a little bit about recruitment and retention? I know we had obviously a recent in town meeting day back in March, an election of Mayor Dunches was reelected by a pretty healthy margin, and then the Board of Aldermen sort of took a different direction, a little bit more conservative, if you will. Maybe, I don't know how else to put it, legacy kind of people who had been on the board in years past. Some of them had been up at the legislature for a couple of terms or longer and then had come back. So some of the people that were on the board before town meeting were not reelected, and yet the mayor was. So we've got, and again, I talked with Dave Allaire, and I had Billy Gillum and Larry Copley on earlier a few weeks back. And I'm a big believer in balance and the fact that if you can have people with different political views get together and talk about what they each need, you wind up with a better policy, or in my situation, a better law than you would have if it was just sort of rammed down people's throats. So I'm hoping that that's true. We've got a little bit of controversy, to be fair, with the recreation director. And again, as we record this on April 28th, it'll air on May 4th. So I don't think anything's going to happen in the week ahead of us, but I don't know. There's now, I guess, a committee or a panel or some sort of group that's going to kind of go looking for a new recreation director. But anyway, all of that said, we had a budget which I think would at least allow some vacancies to be filled with the police force, which I think is a good thing. And hopefully, you'll continue to have financial resources from both the city and the state. Yeah.
So over the last several years, as going back, beginning of COVID and after George Floyd, again, it wasn't unique to Rutland, wasn't unique to Vermont, but it really across the country where those who had started their career in law enforcement sort of reconsidered, and we saw a lot of separations from law enforcement, and it was difficult to sort of fill those positions. Fortunately here, we didn't have, there was no desire on anyone's part to defund the department, unlike other areas of the state and certainly throughout the country. But nonetheless, we had some separations, and for various reasons, and our numbers were down. It was difficult to really provide the level of service, as I always say, that our community expects and deserves. And so we were trying to do some things in the interim because all the members of the department really were stepping up and doing a lot more than they ever had to do. And so going through the board was very supportive in approving a lot of these sort of incentive type things, recognizing the sacrifices, recognizing the additional work those who were still here had to perform. And so that sort of sustained us through the lean times. And then going forward, coming out of COVID and a contract, we started negotiating a contract. The board was, again, very supportive in providing some enhancements and some, really becoming more competitive because, and I always say this, we negotiate a contract, and if it's good for 3 years, the conditions that exist 3 years into the contract were vastly different than they were in the beginning of the contract. And so the last contract we settled prior to this, the conditions were very different. And so, 3 years down the road, we weren't as competitive any longer in a lot of our positions. And so this contract really addressed that, and the board ultimately ratified it. And it allowed us to, that I think is absolutely what allows us to recruit and retain. And so our numbers are up right now. It's allowing us to do some things more proactively. But it is a buyer's market. And so prospective employees shop around and look for sort of the best deal, like you would when you're shopping around. And I think we're very competitive right now. I think it's served us well, just very recently. But again, we've got to continue to monitor it. This contract is another 3-year contract. We are almost a year into the term of the contract, although it was just settled. So going forward, it'll be in effect for another it won't expire for another 2 years. The terms will remain in place until a successor agreement's negotiated. But we've got to continue to monitor this. And my hope is that we don't have to go back to the board down the road before we start negotiating a new contract to make some adjustments. But we do. There's not a sort of you fix it once and you're done. Soon after we settled our contract and the board ratified it, the union ratified it, there was an agency just south of here that had a 3-year contract whose raises sort of exceeded what ours were, and ours I think were very competitive. So it's never easy. We have to continue to watch it, but again, in the short term, we've been able to, I think, recruit, retain, do some things that we weren't otherwise able to do, and we'll continue to watch it going forward.
Now, is the 3-year period normal in terms of the length of a contract? Do the fire department also do a 3-year? I'm trying to get a sense statewide. Are there annual contracts, or are most of them at least 2-3 years?
I think most of them are more than a year, but there are some that are a year, partly because I think the conditions do change fairly frequently. In a more stable environment, it might make sense to do a longer-term contract, but in a somewhat volatile environment, I think sometimes the parties are reluctant to enter into a longer agreement. But there are. They're generally longer than a year, anywhere from 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
But again, depends on sort of the conditions and the appetite of the parties negotiating.
And of course, who would have known 10 years ago that lumber would have gone from whatever it is for a 2x4 tripled in price, or eggs, or gasoline, so those are things that obviously from a union point of view have to be taken into consideration when you're negotiating a contract, because you owe it to your members to make the best deal you can. And then, as you say, once you sign, okay, now that's where we are. But it'd be nice to think that prices could come down in the intervening 3 years, and you'd be looking at a pretty good situation.
Sure.
it doesn't ever seem to happen that way.
It doesn't. And certainly I think here ours was quite the opposite. And so fortunately the board, again, was very supportive, and about January of 24 did provide sort of an interim adjustment to the salaries because of the conditions that had changed so drastically from the time the prior contract was negotiated up until last year. And so before the contract was even expired, before it had even expired, the board did approve some adjustments. So we were fortunate, and that helped us, as I said, sustained us until we got to the table and began negotiating.
And again, I think part of it is, I'll just speak for myself if I have to. I think the city realizes what an exemplary police force we have, and should be rewarded in the sense of showing their support financially to get people, in a stable situation. I can't imagine how difficult it would be if you are working for a wage that's under where you absolutely need it to be, and then you still have these challenges day in and day out with people pushing back. So I'm happy to hear that the contract was signed, and going forward, we look forward to many more.
No, we're incredibly fortunate here and incredibly appreciative of the support we have in the community with our elected officials. We couldn't do it without that. And again, we couldn't attract. And it's one of the things I think that attracted us to individuals from another department where they didn't necessarily experience the support from either elected officials or the community itself. I'm not sure entirely familiar with the dynamic, but I think that was a part of it.
Was that a reason? I probably should have asked you this when we first met, because you were in New York at one time,
yes, and
then came here. Did you do that because you'd heard good things about the Rutland community, or was it something else that drew you here?
Yeah, no. So again, coming from Schenectady, I was familiar with Rutland, and I was ready to retire from Schenectady, but didn't want to retire from law enforcement, and so I did. And I was familiar with Rutland. Some of our investigations in Schenectady actually brought us to Rutland, and so I was familiar with it, and I was familiar, I learned about Project Vision, and I saw the incredible support of the community, and it's what we had worked on in Schenectady for a long time, because we didn't always have it. Schenectady was a great city, a lot of good people, but there were times when the department sort of failed its residents, and we worked through that, and that's going back quite a number of years. But we worked through that and got to the point where we were in a good position, and so at that point I was ready to retire, and I saw in Rutland exactly what we worked for in Schenectady, and I saw the support, how active the community was, really defined by Project Vision. So that's really what attracted me here.
We're talking to Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen. We have to take our second break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we'll be back with the Chief in just a minute. We are back on Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore. Thank you for joining us today. We're talking with Rutland City Police Chief Brian Kilcullen, and our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society. Again, the 179th Vermont State Fair is coming up August 12th through the 16th at the fairgrounds here in Rutland. So we talked a lot about different topics today with the chief, and one of the things I'm kind of curious about in the legislature, there are judicial committees in both the House and the Senate. I believe there are 11 members of the House Judiciary Committee, including a couple from Rutland, by the way, committee members. And then in the Senate, there's 5. And I don't think we have anybody from Rutland in that. No, I don't believe. I'm trying to go through the composition of the committee as I'm standing on my feet here trying to think. I'm just wondering, and again, it's a personal kind of thing, but I hear it a lot. I spend a lot of time talking with veterans and just sort of good old people in Rutland, and the frustration that people still feel with the way that, somebody is misbehaving, whether it's retail theft or whether it's, being kind of a jerk in public, and they're cited and they're brought in and bang, they're back out. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there's probably one answer that works in every situation, but the frustration is still there. And I don't think we've actually done anything this year. We had a couple bills early that did make a difference, I think. And I don't know how strong you feel about this, but a lot of people say, hey, if you do the crime, you got to do the time kind of thing. And I think that resonates with people. I really do.
I think it does resonate with people. I think most importantly is the ability of the judiciary and the whole system to adjudicate these cases in a timely manner. And so, during COVID, certainly there was quite a backlog of cases. Nothing was really going through the courts. Very little was going through the courts anyway. The SA's office has done a great job trying to address that backlog. But again, I think I mentioned it on an earlier show too. I think the state really has to look at expanding the judiciary. Whether that be into night courts but I think the key is adjudicating these cases in a timely manner. And so when you mentioned the retail theft and sort of these things that occur fairly regularly with certain individuals, and there doesn't appear to be any sort of sanction. Someone commits a retail theft and are given a citation to appear in court. By the time they get to court, they've had another 1, 2, 3, but again, no conviction. So although some of the legislation enhances the ability for the judiciary to impose sentencing, jail time on some individuals, there has to be conviction. And so with most of our scenarios, we're not getting convictions yet while a good number of these offenses are occurring. And so I think expanding the judiciary, in terms of hours, in terms of judges on the bench, facilities, whatever, I think that has to happen. There's got to be some timely, these have to be adjudicated in a timely manner. And unfortunately, it hasn't been able to happen because of the limited resources.
And of course, it all comes back to money, as everything in our world does. Mm-hmm. We did extend a little bit of a situation, I think, with the state's attorneys this year. I happen to be on government operations, and there's an intersection of that and the judicial committees. What are called limited positions are now going to be full-time, and I think that's going to give them, at least the state's attorneys, some more people to work on cases. At one time, we had over, 2,500 cases that still had not been adjudicated statewide. And these were going back to 2000 and 1999. And I mean, it just never seemed to be able to, you never seemed to be able to catch up with yourself on it. So hopefully that's part of it. I think we did authorize 2 or 3 new judges a year or two ago. And I think the governor has appointed 1 or 2 of them. That was the other piece that, everything in government is delayed. It just takes so much time. So we authorize or appropriate money to do a certain thing. Then it goes to the agency involved to come up with rules to do that thing. In the governor's case, he or she has to appoint a judge. Then they have to be approved. And it takes a long time. It isn't something that by next week we can have this all fixed, It's never going to be that easy. I wish it was. You're right, and there are so many sort of moving parts in the system that sort of need to be addressed too. I think it may have been Addison County north of here somewhere. Anyway, I remember reading an article not that long ago about the public defender services in that particular county, and here in Rutland County, we've got a very, very effective public defender's office. And but I think this county didn't have a public defender's office, and it was the work was actually contracted with a private law firm who decided not to participate anymore. And so I don't know ultimately what happened, but again, why is that? Why is there no one that wants to sort of take on that work? Is it because of funding or inadequate funding. And so what are the reasons for some of these breakdowns in the system? They've got to be addressed. You're right. A lot of it does come down to money. Yeah. One of the other, I'll say, criticisms is the Attorney General of the state is very active. I'll say this very carefully, is very active on a national level with lawsuits against the president. I don't think there's any two ways about that. And yet, there are people in the Attorney General's office who could be helping out state's attorneys to take on some of that workload. And up until this point, they haven't. So there's ways to do that as well. They're much better resourced than the average state's attorney's office. Our own state's attorney here, Ian Sullivan, has talked to me about this, and I think feels the same way, that it would be just a really good thing if the Attorney General were able to say, you know what, I'll assign 2 or 3 lawyers to help you out, prosecuting attorneys. And yet that hasn't happened yet. So that was another sort of piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, you're right. And going back, 8-10 years ago, we actually, in our Vision Center, we had provided some office space to the Attorney General's office, who did provide a prosecutor here in Rutland, and housed right at the Rutland City Police Department in the Vision Center. And probably 7 years ago or so, that sort of went away. But that existed for at least a couple of years. Yeah.
So, again, it's the judicial system, which is probably under-resourced still. It's law enforcement, which has come a long way from where it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but still, to be fair, under-resourced. And certainly the prosecution piece of it, I'm not so much worried or concerned that much with the defending part. They usually seem to be able to find people. I wasn't aware of the thing in Addison County, but the state's attorney's also overworked, and it just, unless all 3 of those pieces is together or are together and working cooperatively, it seems like there's always going to be a fraction there, and it doesn't seem to be working very well. Certainly to have 2,500 cases still open, I don't know what the number is anymore. It just doesn't make any sense. One of the things that we're guaranteed is a speedy trial. And in many cases, there's anything but speedy.
Sure. So. I agree.
Well, we have come to the end of another program. And again, we've talked to Brian Kilcullen, the Rutland City Police Chief, for the last 55 minutes. And it's always good to see you. Anything else you want to bring up? We have about a minute left on the show. No, I don't think so. Hopefully have the opportunity to come back and talk about some more things that are happening. But for now, I think that's about it. Okay. Are there still, by the way, Back the Blue lawn signs available for people? I like seeing those up. Yeah, no, they're still up. I believe Awesome Graphics is still, making those available for purchase. But it's nice to see them still up. Yeah. And it'd be nice if people that had them up took them off for a couple days or moved them a little bit on their lawn, because it's like everything else. If you see the same thing over and over, it doesn't have the same effect as when you first see it. So, no, you're right. Yeah, it'd be nice to get that to happen. All right, Brian, thank you so much for coming in today, and we will hopefully have you back in another month or so, and call you to come back in and chat with us. I will be here. All right, thank you. All right, thank you. And we'll see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.